Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for participating again in the Pontiac Creative Arts Center's Fiber Arts Club. We are on to our December project, which is going to be painting using glue as a resist. Basically, this is a version of Batik, which is a traditional resist and dye method that's popular in many different countries. A lot of different cultures use this. But this is a way to do it that is a little easier as far as like sourcing materials goes, and it's definitely like the more non-toxic version of it. So what we're going to be doing essentially is using a piece of fabric, adding glue, washable glue as a resist, and then painting a design on it and then removing the glue. I am going to explain what I find is like the best way to do this. I'll also give you some alternatives, and then at the end I will explain how to do this with dye if you're interested in going out and sourcing the materials for it, or if you've already done some dye work and you have some of that handy. In order to do this the way that we're going to demonstrate today, what you will need is a piece of natural material. I'm just using actually the cotton muslin that was included in my first grab bag from the Pontiac Creative Arts Center. Cotton muslin works great for this. Silk works great for this. You do not want to use like a polyester material. It won't take the paint right. I highly recommend something to, if you can, something to stretch over and something to attach your fabric to that too as a workspace. Because I'm a painter, I happen to have stretcher bars and a staple gun. This is like the heavy duty version of this. I like this version of this because then when I'm done I can actually just stretch the fabric over this and it's like a painting, and it's like ready to hang. Alternatively, if you don't have these, you could use like an old picture frame, and like thumbtacks would work just fine. If you don't have that available, you could use like a shoebox and like a couple pins. Or you could also use like a needle and thread to just sort of like sew attach this a little bit. But this is a much easier way to work just because if you have it stretched over something when you're working, it's going to be drying out the front and the back at the same time, and also your paint won't puddle or pool, so it gives you a neater finish. If you don't have this available, one thing that works okay as a workspace alternatively is just to grab a garbage bag and just lay it out flat and work on top of that. Just be aware that if you're going to work on top of the garbage bag, because it's not going to be drying from the back at the same time, it's going to take at least 24 hours for your glue to dry and at least 24 hours for your paint to dry. As far as the actual application goes, we're going to be using glue as our resist. What I've read online highly recommends using a gel glue. This is Eileen's Clear Gel Tacky Glue. I know Elmer's also makes a gel glue. I'm also just going to try plain white Elmer's glue. As long as it is a washable or a water washable glue, you're good to go. The reason that the gel glue is preferred is just because when you apply it, because you do have to do a thick enough coat that it goes to the back of the fabric, when you apply this, it doesn't spread out as much, so you're able to get finer designs. The last things that you will need are your paint things. You're going to want to use acrylic paint. Acrylic is a plastic paint basically, so it sticks to fabric really good. As far as what kind of acrylic paint, you can use whatever you want. I'm going to test a few different ones today, like the Folk Art Americanas that you can pick up at most craft stores and Walmarts. These are fine. I happen to have these Blick Studio paints. These ones are a little bit thick, but I'll mix them with a little bit of water to get them the right consistency. And if you would like to do something that's actually going to stick to fabric and be wearable afterwards, like wash-safe wearable, you can get a fabric paint. Any fabric paint is fine. I happen to have these Lumiere ones from Jacquard. These ones came from Dick Blick, and they are good for everything: fabric, canvas, leather, vinyl, wood, etc. Also, if you are a person who's like, I have some paints already, but I would like this to be something that's wash fast as opposed to something that you maybe get to wash once or twice before the paint starts to distort. You can actually buy a medium that's like called a fabric medium that you can add to your acrylic paints that will make them wash fast. So keep that in mind. That's another thing that you can source from Blick. You'll also definitely want a container for water, a couple brushes, a rag to clean out your brushes, and a surface to mix your paint on. If you don't paint at home usually, a paper plate works just fine for that. I do, so I have a canvas that I'm going to use to mix up my paints on. Okay, that's it for materials. I'm going to kind of have to do this video in two parts because it does take some time for the glue to dry. And it's really important that the glue is dry before you start to add your paint to it. Otherwise, you won't get the resist effect when you're done. So I've got my fabric. I gave it like a quick iron just so that the creases aren't hard on it. A little bit of wrinkling is okay, but you don't want any hard creases. And then I've got my frame just sort of tapped together. Again, these are canvas stretcher bars is what I'm using. It's because it's what I have already. I'm just going to place my fabric over my stretcher bars. You obviously want the stretcher bars to be a bit smaller than the fabric is so that you can stretch around the sides of it. And then for me, I'm just going to make my life easy and staple into the side. Again, you could use push pins. I'm going to do one staple on one side, and I tend to do them kind of loose so that they're easy to remove. I did that right in the middle on one side. I flipped it over. Now I'm going to come across. I'm stretching it a little bit, and then I'm going to give it a loose staple. I'm going to do the same thing in the center on the other two sides. When I do the first one, I don't tend to pull it very hard because I don't want to distort it. I just kind of want to let it be where it's at. And then when I do the one across from it, I tend to pull it a little bit tighter so that I don't get so much slack. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna add a couple more staples into the side. This doesn't need to be tight all the way through. You just want it to be not wrinkly and loose anywhere, just because it helps the paint stick better. So I'm gonna keep doing that technique, working out from the center. So my next couple staples will be like next to that one and then next to that one. Okay, actually that looks like that's gonna work just fine for me. You know, you can see when I touch it, it kind of comes back. I only ended up with 3 staples on each side. Some people really like to do them all the way to the corners. I'm not gonna worry about that with this, mostly because the design I'm gonna do is gonna be kind of loosey-goosey and organic, so it's cool with me if the edges get a little distorted. So if you want to plan out what you want to design ahead of time, of course you are more than welcome to do that. I would just recommend making a piece of paper cut to the same like dimensions if you can of what you're working on, if not the same proportions, and then you can scale it up later. I really want to just do something fun and loose and organic on here, so I'm just gonna go for it. For my design, like I said, I want to try, everything's recommended, the gel glue, because it doesn't spread out, but I kind of want to try this Elmer school glue too, just because I like to go with the cheapest, easiest to find materials as possible, because I think that makes it easier for everyone involved. And when I add it, what's going to be important is that I'm pressing the tip to it, and that I'm doing a decent line. Wherever you add the resist, the paint's not gonna take to. So that area will be white, or potentially if you get bleed through it, might be just lighter. Another thing that's important is kind of just making sure that resist is actually coming through to the back a little bit. It may take a minute or two for you to be able to see it, but yeah, I'm looking at the back and I'm seeing some of the glue is coming through, so that's good. I may just run my glue through it 1 or 2 more times to make sure. This is why I personally think that lighter material is better for this. You can see this cotton is almost darn near see-through, so it's kind of perfect for a resist. But yeah, I am noticing as this is drying, it's spreading out a little bit more, which is okay. I'm kind of going to use it for some of my bigger lines that I don't mind if they spread out. And I just want to point out too, you'll see as I worked, like this area is pretty thin right here. I don't know that that's gonna actually act as a resist, so I'm just gonna go back in and thicken it up a little bit. Same deal, this area is definitely too thin, so I'll just go back in and thicken it up. Okay, cool. Now I'm gonna try out this gel glue. Ooh, gel glue doesn't even have the top removed yet. And again, this particular gel glue is Eileen's Clear Gel Tacky Glue. I'm also willing to bet if you have Eileen's Tacky Glue at home, that will probably work fine for this project. I also have a theory that if you were to paint on Mod Podge and it was thick, that it would also work for this project. I just don't have any to test that with. It definitely does seem like this gel glue sort of goes on and does not run at all, so it's kind of nice. Just because I'm curious, I'm going to sneak a peek and see if it's coming through. Here's a little bit. Now, when I say coming through, just to clarify, this is not a necessary aspect of this project. But you can kind of see like the glue is still pretty much on the other side of my fabric, which is okay. It just means that when I attach or when I paint on my paint later, I'm only going to add it to this side. If you wanted to do something like, say, really liquidy paint for like watercolory effects, or I happen to have this fabric paint that I've used in Batik in the past that is called Dynaflow. It's a jacquard color. This stuff is liquid. If you're going to be using stuff that's really, really liquidy for your paint, I would highly recommend when you have a chance to let this dry, coming to the back side and doing a layer of resist on the back. Again, this is only if you're using paint that's really, really liquidy, like it's liquid pigment. Or if you want to water down your paints a lot, like watercolor, do a layer of resist on the back too. Otherwise, you're going to end up, as it spreads out and bleeds, it's going to bleed right through the resist. For me today, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use paints that are a little bit more viscous. So I'm just going to do a layer on the front and go with that. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of keep adding to my design here. And we'll check back in a little while when it's dry. As far as dry time goes, you want to make sure this is dry all the way through, especially because you're going to be adding more water-based stuff to it, which means that it could very easily spread it around if it's still wet in the middle. I would highly recommend somewhere between 4 to 24 hours of dry time before you move on to adding your paint to the project. So yeah, I'm just going to play around a little bit and we'll check back in when this has had a chance to dry. Okay, cool. So for the second part of this project, this did actually take almost 24 hours to dry. Once the glue is dried, it doesn't really look any different between the two types of glue, but I will tell you the gel glue did actually penetrate all the way to the back of the fabric. Like I can feel it when I touch it, that it's very gluey, whereas the Elmer's glue definitely stuck to just the front of the fabric. It doesn't mean that the Elmer's glue, like the plain glue, doesn't work. It just might not be as neat, and it wouldn't work right with really liquidy paint or with dye. But since I'm going to be using some thicker paints and working on the front of the fabric, I think it should be fine either way. But if you are trying to use liquidy glue, or if you want your lines to be really, really white, I'm definitely going to recommend gel glue. At this point in time, I'm just going to go ahead and try out my paints. I would highly recommend to make sure that you're using the right consistency of paint, because different paints work different. Try it out on some of your leftover fabric off to the side first, just to sort of see what it does when you apply it, right? So like, for example, I've got this Lumiere paint, which is actually a fabric paint, and you can see it's pretty loose, so I'm pretty sure that if I just brush it on, yeah, that works pretty well. It's got pretty good coverage. Sometimes I have to, you know, apply a little bit more, but that's okay. Yeah, that'll work for me. Whereas alternatively, like the folk art and the Blick acrylic paints that I have, they're a little bit thicker, so I'm willing to bet that for these ones I may have to add a little bit of water. There's not a rule, but basically you'll know that it's not going to spread out and mess you up if you are able to apply it and it doesn't spread out on the fabric a whole bunch. So I'm just mixing up some phthalo green and a little bit of white, because I like the Tiffany kind of blue that it makes, and like, that's okay too. I might add just a little bit of water to it and see what happens. Yes, okay, cool, that's got really nice coverage. It goes across easy peasy. So yeah, you can see when I added that little bit of water to it, it just sort of spread better than if I just used it plain. So I'm cool with that. And yeah, basically when you apply your design, because you have the glue on the side of the fabric, you can just paint over it. And then you're absolutely gonna wanna give this project a full 24 hours to dry. When you go to rinse out your glue, what you'll want to do is just kind of let the fabric, since this is water washable glue, just let it pre-soak in like cool or slightly warm water for, I don't know, like 5-10 minutes. And then you should be able to just scrape the glue off with your fingernail. Do be aware that when you do this technique, you may get some of the paint scraping up too. As long as you're not super aggressive with it, and as long as you give it a chance to pre-soak, it should be okay. Even if you do get a little bit that comes up. So yeah, I'm just, honestly, for me, I kind of just want to do some random color swatches on mine and do something nice and blendy. And just a helpful hint, if you are using acrylic paint that's not fabric paint, and you don't go pick up the fabric acrylic medium and you would like it to be something that's washable and wearable, when your project is done and you've got your glue rinsed all the way out, you could flip it over and iron on the reverse side of it on like, I would say like low medium setting. Sometimes it's even helpful to put like another piece of fabric that is not like a nice linen in between, and that'll just kind of help. Some people like to say set, but really acrylic is plastic, so it just kind of helps it melt into the fabric a little bit. Again, low or medium setting is the highest you would want to go for something like that, otherwise you're just going to be burning the paint. But that's it. I'll post a picture later to show you guys what this looks like when it's done. For me, I'll be letting it dry for 24 hours. I will remove my staples gently with some pliers so they don't rip my fabric, since it's a pretty thin fabric. And I'll pre-soak, rinse out the glue, let it dry out, and then I'll probably actually just re-adhere this fabric to this frame and just sort of let this be like a mounted piece. That's why I like to work with the stretcher bars, because then you have a finishing option for it too. I did want to let you know that I have posted in the chat the alternative if you wanted to do actual batik, because it sounded like from our group meeting a couple people were interested. If you are going to do actual batik, I do want to tell you that is not a non-toxic process. Everything here is pretty non-toxic. If you are working with actual fabric dye, you are absolutely going to need gloves, face mask, or a dust mask, or a bandana for when you're actually mixing up your dye powder. And honestly, I would wear eye protection too. The particles for it are pretty light and tend to get up in the air, and you do not want to breathe them in. Additionally, if you get any dye on your skin, it will stain your skin. There's no getting it out. But yeah, if you wanted to do traditional batik, I always recommend, I like to get my dyes from Pro Chemical and Dye, just because I like their directions. I think their product directions are the best. I did leave a link to their batik instructions, which are very good, on the group chat. But, you know, just in case you're interested, the type of dye that you would need would be MX dye, or Pro MX, or Pro Cyan dye is the type that works best for this. You will also need soda ash, which is also called dye activator sometimes online, or you can pick it up. I think Meyer carries it with the laundry products. It's called washing soda. You will also need baking soda. Two different things, very similar, but they have different chemical properties and do different things in the reaction. You would also need urea, which you can source from ProChem. You would also need Synthropol, or a professional laundry detergent. You would need containers to mix in that are only for dye. You don't want to use them for anything else. You could alternatively, Dynaflow is a paint version where you don't have to buy the dye and all of the chemicals for it. And then some people that do direct application like to use stuff that's called either alginate or Pro Paste Mix. I highly prefer the Pro Paste Mix over the alginate just because alginate is super fumy. This stuff is not fumy at all. It's totally fine. But again, this is a lot more materials to get into. So it's just kind of where you're at. I'm going to stick with the acrylic. I like to do stuff like this. So that's the way that I'll instruct it. But if you do decide to go this route and you have any questions, feel free to hit me up because I do plenty of dye work. I will tell you too, if you decide that you want to get into traditional batik, for your resist, you could get batik wax. I actually really prefer Jacquard brand water-based resist, or water-based Gouda is sometimes what it's called. Honestly, I'm pretty sure it's the same thing as this gel glue though. So you could use gel glue and dye too, I think. Don't quote me on it, just a theory. And if you do direct application with dye instead of with paint, I will also recommend that when you're allowing your fabric 24 hours to set, put it in the warmest part of your house, put it near like a heat vent if you can, and wrap it in a garbage bag so it doesn't dry out. It's going to give you the best color that you can get. Dye does not set correctly under 70 degrees, so it's kind of challenging to do in Michigan winter. But yeah, I'll post some pictures later, and I'm really excited to meet with everyone for a December project and see what you're working on. Just a reminder, you are always welcome to drop progress pics in the chat, and I hope that we can connect there too, in addition to our December meeting. In the meantime, take care, stay warm, and we'll chat soon. Bye!